So I'm going to talk to you today about reflection sessions. So for those that know me, apart from hot sauce, there are kind of two things that get me out of bed in the morning. One is drawing all of my slides for this presentation fairly poorly. And the second is I've been a coach and a scrum master for I'm working with agile teams for about 10 years now. But one of my major passions is helping other coaches and scrum masters, helping them develop, supporting them, working with them. And I've recently been fortunate enough to do that with Xero. So one of the things that we've been finding, Xero's got a bunch of agile coaches, a few of them who are on the call right now. And so one of the things that we're finding is that it's a big space. There's lots of different teams, lots of business areas, and there were lots of coaches going out to these different areas, and sometimes getting a bit disconnected, sometimes finding things difficult. And one of the things about Xero is that it's a culture that is very supportive and works very hard to make sure that people are supported. And so I was working with Chris White, who's on the call now. Hi, Chris. He's incidentally the person that ended up making myself and Gavin do an Irish jig on St. Patrick's Day of all days. But working with him and JPOC, who's one of the other delivery leads in there. So we're working together and figuring out what's a way that we could help coaches support each other and develop alongside each other, know that they're doing things that make a difference. So we ended up gathering. I told you about the drawings that they weren't necessarily great. So we ended up gathering and borrowing, not stealing, but borrowing a few things from a few different areas. So we were trying to create this mechanism that would help people support each other and learn from each other. One of the areas that we stole from was liberating structures. If anybody of you know what Troika Consulting is. Another thing that we stole from is design critique sessions, so which are sessions that designers use to create an environment where they can critique each other and critique each other's work in a safe space. Give each other feedback, learn from each other. And another really interesting space was reflection teams. So Chris's wife works in therapy. So a practice that therapists will use is they'll get support from other therapists by talking through what they've done in an anonymous way, but talking each other through what they've done, getting some support, learning from each other, asking each other questions. And it's a way of learning from each other. So we blended and borrowed, not stole, a lot of these things, and we came up with reflection sessions. So all this is a really simple format for people to be able to share challenges with each other, validate approaches, and get advice. So it might sound like there's more to it, but it's really just a structure for discussion. So with that in mind, we created this session, we ran it, I ended up writing about it. And after writing about it and talking about it, I realized a few things. One, it's got absolutely nothing to do with Agile. And the second is that it's absolutely nothing to do with coaching. Ever since, I've run it with product leaders, with product managers, product owners. I've run it with leadership teams. We've run it within Nomad 8, and we have done frequently so that we can support each other and learn from each other. So if you're wondering if this is something that applies to you, these are some triggers that might let you know. The first is, if you work in the gray, this is absolutely for you. And by this, I mean, is the work that you do complex, where there's no right answer. You can't go, all right, this has happened, so then I need to do this. So you're kind of navigating through complexity. This is where there's no best practice. So there's nothing that you can just pull off a shelf and do exactly this. So you're navigating through things that are complex and uncertain and might not have happened to you before, or not in this specific shape or context. And even worse is if you're working in the gray solo. So if you don't have a team around you that you can bounce things off really frequently, but like a lot of leaders, a lot of product people, scrum masters, coaches, you're off working potentially on your own for a lot of the time. And that's when you get a lot of those like, oh, am I losing my mind sort of moments, or is like, if I'm the only person kind of that's advocating for something, am I maybe the problem? So it's a way of supporting you through that to kind of help you get that support. Also, this is for you if some of your work there's a gap. And by the gap, I mean that there's a bit of a distance between the action that you're taking and the effect that it has. So like either it takes a long while for the things that you're putting in place to actually have that effect, or you don't find out if that thing has an effect at all. So this can be like you might be working in change, for example, and then nothing might happen for a while, and then there might be a restructure and everything that you're doing starts to blow out of the water. Or you might, there may be other things going on in the business that are affecting what you're doing. And in that case, what I've been finding is that it's like with sports teams where you don't have direct control over the outcome. A lot of the useful focus that you should have is on your process and how you're working through things. So like, are you taking in the right inputs? Are you trying the right things? Are you looking at other spaces for inspiration? So those are some of the situations where, and I think, judging by a lot of you that I know on the call, those are all sorts of things that we talk about. When it's not, I build a thing and the light goes on. So it is a really simple format. And one thing I would say is to take a look through this, because after we go through this, you're going to be going through it yourself. So it starts off with stating the challenge, and then you'll dig deeper. There's reflection, and then you share takeaways. So 4 steps. So the first is around stating the challenge. And with this in mind, we created a template that borrows from those different ingredients. But it's really here, what you're doing is the person that's bringing the challenge is doing some thinking through of this problem. So what are some of the things, how do I know that it's a problem? What are some of the effects that it's having? What are some of the things that are helping me forward, or supporting this situation, or pushing it back? So it's trying to think about some of the system level picture about things. And then there's the explicit ask at the end, and look for this when you're going into your sessions. So that person will ask for what do they want? So do they want advice? And in that case, I'm going to ask you to feel free to go full on and give as much advice as you can. Don't worry about stupid answers or the wrong answers. Just be generous with your advice and throw out as much as you can. Or it could simply be just to reflect things back. And if somebody just wants you to hear you reflect things back, that's where you're thinking about of what they've said, what surprises me, what jumps out at me, what's curious, what did I hear, what were the important parts that I took away. Importantly here, if somebody says don't give me advice, please don't give them advice. There's nothing worse than unsolicited advice. I think we can all agree on that one. So when that person is stating the challenge, everybody else that's in the room is going to stay completely silent. This is where I want you to be practicing your listening, thinking about their context, trying to put yourself in their position. Then your facilitator will tell you when time is up, and that's the point where you get a chance to dig deeper. So this means getting curious, asking really open questions. So if your question's got a yes or a no answer, it's probably not an open question. So what are questions that can help you dig deeper, understand more about the context? And make sure that you're not veering off the presenter's agenda. So if that person's got a certain problem that they want to dig into, don't go off into something that's just a pet area of yours. Stick with that person's agenda. So after that time box has ended and you've asked loads of questions, this is where the reflection part of things happens. So in this, the person bringing the challenge will switch off their camera and they'll switch off their microphone. And the reason behind that is so that you can't hear them go, oh, and you can't be influenced by their reactions. So this is where you get a chance to just replay what you've heard, what was curious. And if they've asked for advice, throw out as much advice as you can, and don't worry too much about if it's the right answer or the wrong answer. You've only, after all, had a short period of time to dig into that context. So just be brave, let them fly. What are some things you've tried before? What are some things you've read that might be interesting? Yeah, just let it flow. And then finally, there's a short period of time where the person bringing the challenge will just share back their the notes that they took during that reflection. What are things they're actually going to do? What are things they've learned and they're going to investigate? And this is a really short period of time. And for the rest of you that are in the room, this is again, I'm going to ask you to stay completely silent. Don't worry if they haven't picked up on your idea or your great thought, because that might not actually be something that might work for them. And that doesn't mean that your idea is wrong or not great, but it's just not one that's going to fit at the time. So it's a short period of time, and hopefully they'll thank you for your input. And finally, right before we jump into it and jump into some breakout rooms, I'll send out this link again, but there's a detailed facilitation instructions on our website and on how to run one of these sessions when you take this away and if you go back into your office tomorrow or next week when everybody comes back. So now we're going to give this a go.